Well, good morning, my dear precious church family. It is so good to be able to talk with you this morning on the 4th of July. And happy Independence Day to everybody. Today is also myself and Afrida's wedding anniversary. We chose a good day, right? 4th of July, Dependence Day, not Independence Day. Anyways, we are married 12 years today, and we're thankful to God for that. And I believe that all of you are tremendously blessed to be able to live in this great country, the United States of America. And I hope that you are celebrating today your independence. Anyways, we went hunting last weekend, and that was tremendous. We were with some family in Christ who own the farm, and we got some kudu and some impala, and we've been working meat and eating biltong the whole week through. And early one morning while we were on the farm, I saw my brother listening to this video, watching this video, and he told me that he found it so interesting and he wanted me to also listen to it. And so on the way, driving back from Johannesburg to Durban, we had a long drive. It actually took us longer than we anticipated, about 10 hours. I had some time to listen to this video, and I thought as I was busy listening to this, I think I would like to share the story with you. And that's what I decided to do this morning. And so this morning I'm going to share with you a story of a missionary in New Guinea quite a number of years ago. His name is Otto Koning, and it's called The Pineapple Story. Apparently he wrote a book about this. Apparently other people know about it. Maybe you know about it. I never knew about it, and for me it was quite interesting, and I thought I'm going to put it into my own words, and I'm going to share the story with you and just draw a few lessons from it. And it's an interesting story. Okay, are you guys ready? Okay, let's do this. And so Otto, I hear during the video that he calls himself Tuan, and other times I see that his actual name is Otto. So I'm not quite sure what people called him. Anyways, I'm gonna interchange it. But there's this missionary, and he goes and he becomes a missionary in New Guinea. Now, that's about south of Australia, bordering to Papua New Guinea. I think it's on the same sort of island, and nothing would grow there. And so he started to try and planting different types of fruits and veggies, but the soil was a little bit too sandy, and the only thing that would grow was pineapples. Now, I don't know how often you guys eat pineapples. I don't remember ever eating pineapples in the States. I hope that you actually do get pineapples there. Yeah, I'm sure you do. Anyways, we've got lots of pineapples in South Africa. It's a wonderful fruit. And the place where God would place this missionary and his family would be in a community that were chronic thieves. Okay, so they just stole everything from these poor missionaries. And so as Otto's talking about these people, he cannot stop calling them chronic thieves. He recalls how once he saw a group of women standing there, and he saw the one woman was wearing a necklace, and on this necklace was a can opener. So somehow she's managed to steal it from their kitchen and made a necklace out of it. Sometime later, he saw some men, and he saw that they had funny things in their ears. And when he came closer to look, he saw that they had taken diaper pins and made earrings out of them. And Otto is talking about this, and he says that God sent me among the greatest thieves on earth, probably to teach me the lesson of Luke chapter 14 and verse 33. And in case you don't know what that verse is, it says the following: any of you who does not give up everything he has cannot be my disciple. And so this whole lesson, this whole story revolves around that verse. Any of you who does not give up everything he has cannot be my disciple. Now, for Otto, this was a very difficult thing, because he says that he's Dutch, and apparently Dutch people hold tightly onto their things. I'm also actually Dutch, come from Dutch descent, yet I'm quite okay. But apparently in his culture, his father was stingy and he was stingy, and so it was very difficult to accept it when people stole stuff from you. And so he calls himself the stingy missionary. And for the local people, the way that they would describe somebody that is stingy is that they would call them long-nosed. And so the people called him the long-nosed white man, the stingy missionary. Now, he thought to get everything back from the people as they stole from him. The one day he saw a guy wearing his shirt, and he walks up to the guy, and the guy's got a fish in his hands, and he tries to sell him a fish, but yet he's wearing his shirt. Okay, another guy couldn't walk properly because he had stolen his wife's prescription glasses, and he couldn't judge the space of the floor so accurately. So, I mean, this guy really had some trouble with the community stealing from him. And so he used to carry a box around with him. And when he used to go visit the village people, he would take the box with. And as he sees things that people have stolen, he'd put it in the box and take it back with him. And so he became known not only as the long-nosed missionary, but he became known as the missionary with the box. Okay, so interesting is that, with time, people stealing from him, he got really angry. And one of the people said to him, "Why are you always angry? You're always angry. You're this angry missionary with his box and his long nose." And he answered this guy and he said, "I was never angry until I met you people." And then he says, "I could be a real good missionary if it wasn't for you people." You can imagine how they took that. And so they stole his pineapples. He planted this wonderful garden filled with pineapples, and they kept on stealing his pineapples. Not only the stuff in his house, but they stole his pineapples. And so he decided one of the ways that he's going to stop these people from stealing his pineapples, he's going to close the clinic. He's going to close the clinic. No more pills, he said. And the people answered him and said to him, "So are you going to eat all the pills yourself?" And he says, No. You choose pineapples or pills. You stop eating my pineapples, I'll give you pills. Okay, but if you don't stop eating my pineapples, you won't get any pills. And so the people would come, they would sit on his porch with big headaches and beg him for pills. And he used to tell them, "No, go sit on your own porches where you eat my pineapples, and you go have a headache there where you eat the things that you have stolen." And so a few weeks go past, and the whole garden with the pineapples, they grow full of weeds, and the people complain, "But look at what the garden looks like." And the missionary says, "Well, weed it yourself, since you are the guys that eat all the pineapples that steal it." Anyways, long story short, he ended up paying them to weed the garden. So it took him about 3 years to get the plants to produce pineapples. And now these people just came and they stole them. He was angry. He had never even tasted it. He'd never even tasted one of the pineapples. And the question is why? Why didn't he eat them? Well, because these people would steal the pineapples while they were still green. They ate everything green. So before it was ripe, they would eat it. They didn't even know that bananas turn yellow. They would eat them before they're yellow. And so they kept stealing. And so he decided, okay, the clinic didn't work, so let me close the trade store, the little shop. And then they said, well, the stingy, long-nosed white man, if he doesn't share with us from the shop, then there's no good reason to actually live close to him. And so they moved away into the jungle. They took all their stuff and they moved away. And the missionary was now happy. What a vacation. The people have left. Now he could get his reports written. He could send reports back to his home church. No more people. He was a good missionary now. He no longer got angry. He just sat back and enjoyed the jungle. The problem is that it could get quite boring if you're a missionary and you're not reaching people. You could eat the pineapples, but what would the people back in his home church think about him just sitting and eating pineapples and no longer reaching the local people? Well, one day the usual plane came by to drop off some food, but the grass on the landing strip was too long. The pilot said that, the missionary better get people to cut this grass, otherwise he won't be able to come back and land again, because it's very dangerous for the plane to try and land in grass that's yay high. And so the missionary was forced to go and call the people of the village again so that they could come and cut the grass. And so he sent a young man out to go call them all. 3 days later, the thieves arrived back again, and the stealing started again. But this time it was a little bit worse, because now the missionary had tasted some of the pineapples. Now he really knew what it tastes like, and now he couldn't eat any of them. And so he became even more angry. And the people said to him, "You're always angry. You angry white man, you stingy man." And so he got a dog, an Alsatian. But now listen, at this point, he's tried closing the clinic, he's tried the trade store, and now he's going to get a dog. And he talks about the first day that this dog arrived in the plane. And he says it was the best day of his missionary career as the dog jumped out of the plane and everybody just scattered and ran away. They were so scared of it. The dog did its job. The dog was around the house and nobody stole anymore. So people stayed far away from the mission station. But people didn't want to come close to him as the missionary. And how could you reach people if they don't want to come close to you? And so the dog basically spoiled the work that they were there to do in the first place. People didn't even want to come close to the clinic. They were sick and dying. And so people would take the risk. They would take the dog and put a vine around his neck just to keep him under control. And people would go to the clinic and they'd watch the dog the whole time, and hopefully be able to see the sister before the dog would get loose, because the dog used to chew this vine and get loose and run towards the people. And one day he did come loose, and apparently the sick people were not sick anymore. Some of them climbed on the roof, some of them left their crutches. The whole floor was full of crutches. One guy came in on a stretcher, he went out running. And so he decided he needs to get rid of this dog, and so he got rid of the dog. That also didn't work. It doesn't help to be a missionary if you can't connect with the people. And so he tried everything. And eventually he decided, okay, this is what I'm going to do. The clinic doesn't work. The trade store doesn't work. The dog didn't do the job. Fourthly, let me split the garden in half and say to the people, okay, you guys can take half of the garden. The other half of the garden is mine. Okay, so you can eat the pineapples on the one side, I'll eat the pineapples on the other side. And so he gave away half of his garden. He was losing it in any ways, right? So you might as well give it away. But that didn't work either. Because the people would steal both sides again in any ways. When he comes out and looks at the garden, he sees there's some guy standing in his garden, and when they see him, they suddenly jump to the other side of the garden and make as if they didn't steal his pineapples. And he made a promise to God. He said, I will never get angry again. But then a man walks to him with a pineapple that comes from his side and asks him if you'd like to have a bite of his pineapple. And that just got him crazy again, because it's his pineapples. But now the people want to sell the pineapples to him. And so the missionary says, I kept getting angry and kept repenting. 1 John 1 verse 9. God keeps forgiving when I keep confessing. If I confess, he forgives. Do you believe that? If I confess, he forgives. Here's this angry missionary, and every day he has to repent. Do you sometimes feel like that? There's something going on in your life, some sin, and every time you feel so low, you keep repenting. I want you to know that God forgives you. The theory of the people was this, because the question needs to be asked, why did they keep on stealing this? This was their theory. If my hands planted them, then my hands can eat them. He bought the land from the chief. He bought the plants from other missionaries. Yes, it is true. The garden is yours, they would say, and the plants are yours, but the fruit are ours. Because our hands planted the plant, and so the fruit belongs to us. And so he said to them, what is your fruit doing on my plants? And they said, well, it doesn't matter. The fruit is ours. The plant is yours, but the fruit is ours. In their culture, what you plant is what you eat. The people said, they always wondered, why did he get so angry over something he didn't own? Interesting, hey? Do you ever do that? Do you get angry over things that you don't even own? Let me remind you that everything belongs to God. Why do we get angry with things that belong to God? After about 2 weeks, he let them take the plants. He said, okay, well, then you take the plants, go plant it in your own gardens, you can have it. I'm going to start over again. It's okay. 3 more years until I get pineapples, but I'd rather do that. And so he actually paid those rascals to take the plants out, but they didn't even take it to their homes and go plant there. They just dropped it next to the airstrip. Nobody got pineapples. And so he decided he's going to pay them with machetes to plant the new garden, but they forfeit the right to eat the pineapples. That was the deal from the beginning. And a year went by, and then he went on a year's rest. And so he let the people replant the garden again, and then he went on a Sabbath rest, and hoping that God would not send him back to those thieves. He told God, please send us anywhere except back to those thieves. But you know how it works. God wants to make the choices in our lives. Now, during that rest time, he was in Chicago and he attended a seminar, and someone spoke the whole night on this idea of rights. And all this poor missionary could think about the whole night as he was sitting there was his pineapple garden on the other side of the world and his right to eat them. But the lesson was this: give your possessions to God. God takes good care of his property. Whatever you give to God with the right motives, you will never lack in that thing. And that is true. God can do a better job with our stuff than we can. He continued to say, the people you fight with, you will never be able to win for Christ. Wow. That statement grieved him. He had fought with people in that mission field. People have died there and have gone into eternal damnation. And he was their missionary. He was fighting for pineapples while people were dying in their sin. He was so grieved. He never thought that God would forgive him, but God did. God will forgive you no matter what you do. He continued listening to this lesson. If you keep fighting for your rights, you will destroy your health. And he had already experienced this. He had tranquilizers. He was weeping. That night he gave over that pineapple garden to God. He went back to the jungle, stood in the garden and gave the garden to God. And he said to God, you decide who you give these pineapples to. If you give it to your faithful missionary, he said, I would surely appreciate it. And then he saw how God grew those pineapples. They were bigger and better than the ones that he had grown first. Ladies and gentlemen, God can grow anything better than we can if we give him a chance. He won't push us out of the way. We need to give it over to him. And so the missionary negotiated with God over those pineapples. He saw the people look at the pineapples and then decided, I need to give God advice. They were getting too ready to steal them, and they were not ripe yet. God had to stop them from stealing his pineapples. And he had experience. He could tell God, these people are going to steal your pineapples. I hate to see God lose his pineapples, he said. You won't believe this. They stole all God's pineapples. He didn't even get one. And so he got angry again. But he got angry for God. They were stealing God's pineapples. Now it was a holy anger, right? He gave the garden to God, but he was still getting angry and wearing himself out for those pineapples. If you stay angry long enough, your health will be destroyed. And this is what happened to him. His nerves were bad, he was getting sick, and finally he fell on his knees and told God, Lord, I can't help you anymore. I'm tired and sick of this. I have no fight left. You are now going to have to look after your own garden. If you don't, nobody else will. That morning, God showed him Romans chapter 6. That talks about being reckoned dead to sin. And so he gave up the garden, the right to own a garden, and he died to the right to eat pineapples. Eventually, he conquered this issue to the extent that he would wave at the thieves stealing his pineapples. So he'd walk out and wave at the thieves, and the thieves would say, oh my goodness, he's gone blind. He can't see that we're stealing the pineapples. But it wasn't the case. He stopped fighting and he gave it over. It was around that time that a group of them stood close by in the garden, and one of the leaders spoke up to the missionary and said to him the following. Listen to this. You have become a Christian, haven't you? He answered, why you say that? Well, you don't get angry anymore when we take these pineapples. You see, they didn't see all the good things he did as a missionary. They only remembered when he blew it, the times that he got angry. And the missionary wondered, how does he know what a Christian was? For 8 years he had preached about Christ, how he was, how a Christian lives. The people said, whenever you said that, we always hoped that we would meet one day. Now that is the difference between our walk and our talk. I was preaching at them, the missionary says, but they are watching me get angry. And so the man asked the missionary, why don't you get angry anymore? And so he said, I don't need to get angry anymore because I gave the garden away. And the man said, you should have given the garden to me. And then he said, who did you give the garden to? The missionary said, I will tell you tomorrow. He felt so bad at that point and wanted to move to another tribe because in their eyes he'd only become a Christian now. Now Hyman was one of the key leaders of this tribe, and he remained outside the house that night questioning people, trying to find out who owns the garden. And the missionary watched them through the window. They had a problem. And this was their problem. How can we steal if we don't know who owns them? How can we steal these pineapples if we don't know who owns them? It was a difficult night for hungry thieves. Was it the head hunter of the village that now owned the garden? Was it the witch down the road that owned the garden? Who owned the garden now? When he laid down on his bed that night, he heard the whole village was awake. A whole commotion was going on outside as they tried to figure out who owns the garden. It was so neat for the missionary because finally they were losing sleep over the garden that he's been losing sleep over for the last 3 years. And so they went to the next village in the middle of the night to find out whose garden it is, but nobody knew. The next morning, they surrounded the missionary house, more than 300 of them. His wife woke up early. They all stood there with folded arms and shouted at him, who owns the pineapples? The missionary said, I gave them to my God up in heaven. They started rubbing their noses because apparently that's how they think. They rub their noses. And they asked, doesn't your God have pineapples in heaven? And he answered, I don't know, but I gave them to him in anyways. The next question was this, how many moons ago did you give God this garden? And he said to them, about 5 or 6 moons ago. And a great commotion started. Everybody started talking. Then they told the missionary, please go into your house. Go now. Pray to your God and tell him that you want the garden back. The missionary said, no, I don't want to. I've been so happy since I no longer owned it. I can sleep again. My worries are gone. My anger is gone. My health is better. I'm so happy not to own it. Ladies and gentlemen, don't envy the rich man. He has more worries than you will ever have. And then they said to him, we want you to own the garden. You are the cause of all the problems. You tell your God that you made a mistake because you did. The missionary then asked, but why do you say so? And then they told him that since he had given his garden to God, they have been experiencing the worst problems in the village. The rain wouldn't fall, the gardens wouldn't grow, they could catch no fish, they couldn't hunt any pork anymore, women aren't getting pregnant, everything is going wrong. They've been making sacrifices to the demons. They've been walking, having talks about who has wronged them. They couldn't figure out the problem. But now they knew it was the missionary. He had given the pineapples to his God. They have been stealing them, and his God was angry with them. They are upset. He must take back the land. They didn't give his God permission to own that land. And then the missionary told them, I don't want the garden. How about you stop stealing God's pineapples? They didn't like that. They started preparing their spears and bows to take him down. In that moment, he called out Haimo, the sort of leader of the village, the sharper man from earlier. He called him out, and the man walked forward with a smile. He said to the missionary, I see you have a problem. You cannot be a Christian and own the garden at the same time. And the missionary said, you are right. Remember the verse, unless you forsake all that you have, you cannot be my disciple. You remember that? You see, discipleship means lordship. You can be born again and fight for your rights, but you can't be his disciple. Lordship Christianity is the Christianity that shows. The people said you can't be a Christian and own the garden. Then you would be an angry, long-nosed white man again. Hyman explained this to the people, but they weren't happy. Hyman then started talking to them. Hasn't this missionary been a nice man since he started giving the garden to his God? And if we make him take the garden back again, won't he turn back to being a miserable fellow? They shouted back, but we will all starve. Hymer then said, hey man, if you can't resist the pineapples, then walk the other way around on the other path down to the river, and then you will never have to walk past the garden. Let his God own them, because then he can be a Christian. The missionary interjected at that point and said, Hymo, I really want to be a Christian. Please let me be a Christian. And finally, one person asked the missionary, does your God see in the dark? And the missionary answered, yes, he does. And that was the first realization they had, that the God of the missionary sees everything. And it was at that point that they started to understand God. One guy said, "Your God is big, isn't he?" And the missionary responded. He said, "Oh yes, he controls the rain, pregnancy, the pigs in the bush, and the fish in the river." And they marveled and said they won't steal God's pineapples anymore. Well, at least half of the crowd said so. They were now afraid of God. The fear of God is the beginning of conversion, ladies and gentlemen. The other half still stole pineapples, and so he still didn't get angry. They brought the pineapples to his store where he bought them from some of them. Now, out of the group of people who didn't steal pineapples anymore, some young men developed and they became trainee preachers. And they said they can't steal the pineapples anymore because the God who owns this garden is too big. And this is how some people started getting converted. One morning, the missionary woke up and these preacher boys were outside standing by the porch, and the whole porch was filled with pineapples. And they asked him to take the pineapples into the house. And he said, whoa. What do you mean I've got to take all these pineapples into the house? They said, "We can't watch them anymore." And what had happened was these preacher boys had taken turns watching the pineapples through the night. While the missionary was sleeping, these guys were protecting the pineapples without being paid because they started to believe it wasn't right to steal God's pineapples. The people that stole his pineapples had now become the protector of those pineapples. God sure can take care of his property, can't he? And God delivered the pineapples right in front of his door. He didn't even have to walk into the garden to go fetch pineapples. Do you see how the story develops? The thieves kept stealing. The preacher boys tried protecting. But inevitably, whenever anyone stole pineapples, someone in their family got sick. Chickens would die. Something would go wrong. The preacher boys would then go and say to those families, "Have you been stealing Tuan's pineapples?" They would say yes. And he would say, "Well, now you know why you are suffering. His God is on you and his God is big." Overnight, people would come and leave the fruit on the front porch of the missionary house so the curse could be lifted from their lives. They became afraid to steal. He went away for 3 weeks and told everybody to eat the fruit. When he came back, all the fruit was rotten. And he asked them why they didn't eat it after he told them to. And they said, "Tuan, you are one thing, but your God is something else. We don't want to mess with him." And now he had so much fruit, he couldn't get rid of it. Can you see what God does? And this is the same thing that he will do in our lives. Let God take care of your things, and you will never lack. Question this morning: what is your pineapple garden? And have you given it over to God? That thing that you're so worried about, that you're losing sleep over, have you given that over to God? Let me tell you this: God can take care of your garden better than you can. Jim Elliot said, "He is no fool who gives what he cannot keep to gain what he cannot lose." And the opposite is also true. He is a fool who keeps fighting and struggling for that which he cannot keep. I want to challenge you today to surrender. Surrender everything to him. Give up everything to God. Let him take control of it. Because the more you fight, the more miserable you become. Here's a nice tree illustration. Look at this picture, and what do you think about this? This swing is not going to work so well. You're going to be knocked around. And so the missionary talks about this picture that I think it was his brother showed him, and then his brother then said to him, "But look, here's what engineers did to solve the problem. Here's the next picture." And so we try to fix the problem. The problem with the first picture was that you'd be knocked against the trunk of the tree. But now the trunk of the tree has been taken away. And now the swing can go about freely through great engineering work. And that's usually what we do. We try to fix things ourselves. But look at the third picture. God is the creator of the tree, and God has solved the issue already. All we've got to do is give it over to him. And now the swing can work perfectly. And so my final words to you this morning is, let God do it. He does a better job than you and me. God bless you. Enjoy the rest of Independence Day. Love you all. Bye-bye.